right.
Okay, we
Welcome,
are live.
everybody. Okay, thanks, Jamie.
Yep.
If you have concerns about your child's emotional well being, behavior, or other challenges that are affecting their progress at school, a special education evaluation may be the next step. We're glad you've joined us this afternoon to discuss special education evaluation. Our training today is geared toward Minnesota parents. So if you're a parent living in a different state, please note that laws in your state may vary. If we have time at the end, we'll host a question and answer session. Participating in the Q&A can, or just even listening to the questions can be a really helpful way to apply what you'll hear today. We ask that you try to put any questions you have in the Q&A box that's on your screen, usually at the bottom of the screen. Please keep questions general in nature rather than specific to your child to help ensure that the discussion benefits everyone. If you have questions that are specific to your child, we invite you to connect with an advocate at Pacer who'd be happy to assist you. Next slide. So my name is Jeannie, and I'm an advocate and trainer at the Pacer Center. I have two kids who are now young adults who were on IEPs, and both had a mental health component to their IEP. Colleen?
My name is Colleen Cascudo. I've been with Pacer for almost 3 years. I have 3 kiddos, 2 of whom have gone through the whole special education process, starting with birth to 3. And now we're entering high school and middle school. So we've been through that process. I've lived through it as a parent and as a special education teacher, as a general education teacher. So I am looking forward to being here today and diving into this topic. Next slide, please, Jamie. So a little bit about Pacer Center. So Pacer, we are the only organization in Minnesota that supports families of children and young adults with any disability from birth to age 26. Pacer services are provided free of charge to Minnesota families, but please note that each state has their own parent training and information center, and Pacer is Minnesota's. So if you are accessing this workshop from another state, please contact your own state's PTI for state-specific information.
So today we'll learn about what a special education evaluation is, when you might consider requesting one for your child, how the district evaluates, and your rights within the process. Next slide.
So a special education evaluation is conducted to determine whether a student has a disability that requires special instruction at school. It identifies the student's unique educational strengths and needs, which provides the data necessary to determine eligibility for special education services. If your child is found eligible for services, the evaluation data guides the development of an individualized education program, or IEP. The IEP outlines tailored instruction, related services, accommodations, and modifications to support your student's progress at school. The special education evaluation is intended to be comprehensive, investigating all areas of suspected disability and educational need based on concerns raised by parents and school staff. The scope of evaluation will include standardized assessments, rating scales, behavioral observations, interviews with teachers, parents, and the student when appropriate. It will also review academic and disciplinary records. These tools help assess intellectual, academic, physical, functional, communication, social, emotional, and behavioral factors that may impact the student's engagement with learning and overall functioning at school. The evaluation also includes background information, such as educational history, medical and family history, and observations across settings, such as home, school, and community. For students with emotional behavior concerns, an FBA, or functional behavior assessment, may be conducted. The FBA looks at conditions under which behaviors occur and don't occur. They identify potential triggers and looks for patterns to provide insight to school staff about why behaviors are occurring. This helps the team develop individualized strategies for skill building and support. The FBA may be included as part of the special education evaluation or conducted separately. You have the right to expect a thorough and accurate evaluation from the district. Assessment tools must be reliable, valid, and non-discriminatory. They must be administered in the child's primary mode of communication, such as their native language or using sign language or braille. The evaluation process should be culturally responsive, considering how cultural background may influence behavior and responses. Next slide, Jamie.
Yeah. So, when might you consider evaluation? If you have concerns that your child might be experiencing challenges at school, consider reaching out to your child's teacher to discuss observations related to academic performance, behaviors, peer interactions, communication, executive functioning, sensory regulation, motor skills, or any other area that may be affecting their ability to access their education. It's important to note that students with emotional behavioral needs may qualify for services even if they earn high grades. Academic achievement is one factor in evaluating eligibility, but a student may still require special education services if a disability affects their engagement and progress at school. These needs might look like school avoidance, work refusal, classroom behaviors, difficulty with attention, conflict with teachers, or peer relationship difficulties. The concerns listed on this slide and those we'll explore next are not exhaustive. They're intended to spark your thinking about areas you might consider when discussing an evaluation plan with the school team. Next slide.
So key indicators might include a decline in academic performance, mood swings or disproportionate emotional responses, frequent outbursts or oppositional behaviors, persistent sadness or signs of depression, anxiety that limits school participation, difficulty regulating emotions, impulsivity and poor decision making, trouble maintaining attention, truancy, school avoidance or refusing to do schoolwork, lack of interest in socializing, challenges with relationship problem-solving skills, difficulty understanding social cues, heightened sensitivity, participating in risk-taking behaviors, low self-esteem that interferes with learning or school participation, unexplained physical complaints such as headache or stomach aches, regression to earlier developmental behaviors, sleep disturbance or appetite changes. Also, difficulty expressing needs and asking for help. When indicators such as these occur over time and affect a student's ability to make progress at school, especially if other interventions, supports, or accommodations, such as those that may have been provided in a 504 plan, aren't working, it may be time to consider an evaluation. Under the Child Find mandate within the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, districts are obligated to locate, identify, and evaluate all children from birth through age 21 with a suspected disability living within the district boundaries who may need special education services. This includes students who attend public school, private school, are homeschooled, or unhoused. Therefore, if you suspect that your child may have a disability impacting their progress at school, you have the right to request that the district conduct a special education evaluation. Next slide.
So, how do you ask for a special education evaluation? An evaluation request should be in written form via email or hard copy letter mailed or hand delivered to the school. It can be helpful to create an outline before drafting your request. You can address the letter to the principal or the district special education director or both. In your request letter, you'll want to include the date you're writing and sending the request, your child's full name, school, and teacher's name. Describe your concerns. Include diagnosed disabilities if your student has any, and share brief examples of ways in which you observe your child struggling at school, such as reading, math, behavior, or attention. Clearly state that you're formally requesting a full and comprehensive special education evaluation for your student. Ask that the district send their responses to you in writing within 14 calendar days. Close your letter with a thank you, include the best way for the school to reach you with their response, and sign your name. If you don't receive a response within 14 days, follow up by contacting the principal by phone, email, or in person to make sure they've received your request. Ask that they respond to you in writing. Next slide.
Sometimes a district will deny a parent request for special education evaluation if they feel your child can be supported in other ways. They may refuse your request altogether, or they may propose delaying the evaluation in favor of first trying interventions or a 504 plan to see if these options might provide what your child needs to make progress. If you feel these options will help, you can agree to try them prior to initiating a special education evaluation. However, interventions, a 504 plan, or other ideas the district may propose should not be used to delay or deny an evaluation if one is indicated. If the district denies your request for evaluation, or if they suggest trying something else first, they are required to provide a statement of their denial and a written explanation in the form of a prior written notice, or PWN. If you disagree with their decision, you must state your objection in writing on the PWN. You can use the PWN to write your request for a dispute resolution meeting to resolve the disagreement. If your request for evaluation has been denied, please feel free to reach out to PACER and an advocate can discuss options for resolving the dispute with you. Next slide.
So once the district agrees to evaluate, they may schedule a meeting to discuss your concerns. You must be given opportunity to share the concerns you'd like to see addressed in your child's evaluation plan. It's important to know that there's no one-size-fits-all evaluation. The plan is tailored to concerns specific to your child, which is why your input is essential. As the person who knows your student best, your perspective on your child's strengths and challenges across various environments is invaluable. The evaluation data is the foundation on which the IEP is built, so assessments included in the plan should create an accurate and comprehensive picture of your child's strengths and needs at school. If the district agrees to evaluate, they'll provide a written proposal in the written document we referred to earlier called the Prior Written Notice, or PWN. The initial evaluation process won't proceed until you sign and return the PWN. Your signature of agreement on the PWN starts the 30 school day timeline for the district to complete the evaluation and hold a meeting to review the results with you. We'll talk more about the evaluation summary meeting later. Next slide.
When considering what to include in the evaluation plan, think about areas where your child is experiencing challenges at school. What are struggles or challenges that your child has shared with you? What causes frustration? Are there specific classes or activities that they don't like? What have you heard from teachers or other school staff regarding obstacles that your child may be experiencing? You don't need to know any of the special education acronyms and terms to communicate your concern to the team as you plan the evaluation together. Simply describe your observations and concerns in your own words. If you have documentation from outside providers, such as a pediatrician, a therapist, a neuropsychologist, these can be helpful to share. Finally, it's important to avoid assuming that behavior alone is the primary source of your child's challenges at school. Behavior is often the symptom of the underlying need. A special education evaluation is intended to ensure that disability needs are comprehensively understood so that the school staff can develop a plan to support your student in a way that works for them to make progress at school. Let's dive in deeper now to examples of behavior that may indicate an underlying need. Next slide.
So, you may have heard a quote by psychologist Ross Green, who says, "Children do well if they can." When a student has an unidentified disability or a disability that isn't well understood by school staff, their struggles may be misinterpreted as defiance, laziness, or a lack of motivation. Here are some examples. A student who consistently avoids reading assignments may be perceived as non-compliant, when in fact they're struggling with an undiagnosed learning disability. A student who doesn't immediately follow directions might be struggling with slower cognitive processing speed, requiring patient repetition or more time to process instructions before they can respond to them. A child that constantly talks with peers or struggles to sit still in class might struggle with maintaining focus. A student that elopes from the classroom may be feeling overloaded with sensory input, so leaving the room may in fact be their attempt to self-regulate. Students with unidentified disabilities may exhibit fight, flight, freeze, or fawn stress responses. These behaviors are often red flags that indicate misunderstood or unmet needs, not intentional misconduct. Children and youth often don't yet possess the developmental capacity to identify why they're struggling or to put their needs and feelings into words. If they haven't built the skills to understand why they're struggling or how to advocate for their needs, they may be unable to meet expectations without the opportunity to build and practice skills and to work with a trustworthy adult to co-regulate. Over time, a child's inability to identify and express challenges they're experiencing may lead to diminished self-esteem, frustration, school avoidance, and behavioral challenges. When expectations exceed a student's capacity, behaviors are often the result. I sometimes use the example when I'm talking with parents that, when you think about as an adult, if you're employed in a job where you're hired under a certain job description, and then you're asked to do something completely different. So, as an extreme example, if you're hired to do oil changes at a garage, and your boss comes and says, I need you to design a new building for our business. We're going to create an extension to our auto shop. So use architectural skills and design a new building. And that becomes a requirement and an expectation. And you're told that if you don't complete that task, that you will lose your job. Well, if you don't have the skills to do that job, if you haven't yet learned, been given the opportunity to learn, experience, practice those skills that are needed, you're going to feel frustration. You're going to feel disengagement. You might want to leave that job. So sometimes it can be helpful to just think about behaviors you're seeing and translate those thoughts into what we as adults experience as well. If we don't have the tools, if we don't have the skills to meet an expectation, we also have behaviors. Sometimes that's even retreating or shutting down. So those are just some things to consider when we're looking at why a student is behaving in certain ways. Think a little deeper, do a little bit more exploring. Okay, next slide.
So keep in mind that is the prior written notice, or the PWN document, that the school will use to identify which assessments they're proposing to include in your child's evaluation. It is the same document that provides you with the opportunity to exert your right in the evaluation planning process. I often tell parents the PWN is your ticket. This is your voice. You're saying, yes, I agree with what the school is proposing, or you do have the right to object. And those options are always on the last page of your PWN notice. When you receive the PWN evaluation plan, the list of assessments are often identified or abbreviated acronyms like the BASC or WISC or BRIEF. Unless you're a special education professional, these won't sound familiar to you. I often suggest to parents to reach out to a case manager with final questions. You can ask them to align each of your original concerns with the proposed assessment listed in the PWN. For example, if you had concerns around social skills, you would want to make sure there is an assessment listed for social skills. When we talked about you can also say, when we talked about the evaluation, I shared sensory processing concerns. Can you show me where on the evaluation plan you've included an assessment in this area? Asking the case manager to align your list of concerns with the assessments included in the evaluation plan helps ensure that all relevant areas are addressed. If a concern you've shared appears to be missing from the plan, you can request that it be added prior to signing the PWN. If the district declines your request, or if you disagree with the proposed plan for other reasons, you can use the parental consent or disagreement portion at the bottom of your PWN to state your concern and request a follow-up meeting or dispute resolution option, such as a conciliation conference, to resolve your disagreement. Once you sign off on the prior written notice, there is a 30 school day timeline for completing the evaluation. That starts once you turn it in signed. They will not proceed with the evaluation without your signed consent.
Before we go to the next slide, I just want to clarify, they won't proceed with the initial evaluation without your consent. And also when it comes to backtracking a little bit to what Colleen was saying about making sure that all of your concerns are included, I just want to emphasize again that if your student qualifies for IEP services, the IEP is built on the data in that evaluation. So if you've expressed a concern to the school and the school says, well, we don't really see that, so we're not going to include it. If you see that impact of a certain disability area or a certain concern, you can feel confident stepping up to say, I would like to see this reflected in the prior written notice, because what we don't want to see happen is the district creates assessments, they conduct the assessments, and if they miss something that's important, so for example, if a student has attention challenges, if they have a hard time focusing, but the evaluation is focused on specifically behavioral concerns, then you end up with an IEP and an IEP process that doesn't incorporate some of those needs that that student is struggling with. So they may continue to struggle with behaviors because that underlying reason hasn't been included in the assessments and therefore isn't understood by the district as a relevant need. Okay, next slide. After the evaluation is complete, an evaluation summary meeting will be scheduled, at which the team will share the assessment findings with you. Evaluation reports are often lengthy and filled with data that isn't familiar to parents. You should feel free to ask questions to ensure you understand the findings. You and other members of the team will then determine if your child qualifies for special education services under one of 13 disability categories. It's important to be aware that educational eligibility is distinct from a medical diagnosis. A medical diagnosis, such as autism or ADHD, is made by a licensed clinician using criteria from a clinical diagnostic manual. Eligibility for special education services is determined based on how a disability impacts a student's learning and participation in the school environment. The IEP team, including the parents, must determine that the disability significantly impacts educational performance and that specialized instruction is needed. So just because a student has an outside disability diagnosis doesn't mean they necessarily will qualify for an IEP. A medical diagnosis is unable to assess educational impact. Only the school's evaluation can make that determination. So if your child is found eligible for services, the team will develop an individualized education program, or IEP, that is tailored to their unique strengths and needs. including goals, accommodations, related services, and supports. The IEP must address all needs identified in the evaluation findings, including those that may not directly correlate with the disability category. For example, if your child qualifies for IEP services based on needs identified under the category of autism spectrum disorders, but the eval report indicates additional educational needs related to writing, the IEP must also address writing. If emotional needs are indicated in the evaluation data, the IEP may include a positive behavior support plan to promote emotional behavioral support and skill development. It may also include a crisis plan to support your child if they experience a behavioral crisis at school, such as eloping, shutting down, or self-harming. If your child is not found eligible for an IEP, the evaluation data may still be beneficial to guide planning for interventions or accommodations in a 504 plan. If you disagree with the evaluation results or eligibility decision, you have the right to request an independent education evaluation, also known as an IEE, at district expense. If you'd like more information, please reach out to PACER to discuss this option. Next slide.
So today we talked about the purpose of a special education evaluation, when you might consider an evaluation for your child, and the steps involved in the process. If your child qualifies for IEP services, it's important to note that your journey as a member of your child's IEP team is just beginning. Being a member of your child's IEP team is a lot like being a member of any other kind of team. For example, if you join a soccer team, you have roles and responsibilities to fulfill. Showing up on time for practices, keeping your uniform clean, communicating effectively with the coach and team members, planning your transportation to games, even fun snacks, right? So likewise, you hold important responsibilities as a member of your child's IEP team. These responsibilities include learning about the special education process and your rights, becoming familiar with your child's educational paperwork, communicating effectively with other team members, and learning how to problem solve and generate ideas with the team to support your child at school. The IEP process provides a wonderful opportunity for sharing ideas, listening to insights, and creating solutions that utilize strengths of everyone at that table. The team functions best when we assume positive intent, listen well, ask questions, maintain a flexible mindset, and step out in confidence that as the parent, you know your child best. Your child's IEP team depends on you as a member to function as it is intended to. At PACER, advocates are available to help you learn about your role as an IEP team member and how you can exert your rights to advocate for your child. Next slide, Jamie.
So before we get to our Q&A time, I want to mention that we'll be sending out a survey to you. I know surveys come with absolutely everything these days, but I just want to put a plug in for the fact that we really value your input as we learn to serve you better as parents, as things are changing fairly rapidly within our educational systems. We want to make sure that we are continuing to be aware of what your needs are and what works for you and what you want to learn about. So we encourage you to complete that. We have also included a QR code here, and you can use that to connect with an advocate to discuss today's topics in greater depth or any other questions or concerns you have related to your students' needs at school. We also encourage you to visit our website at www.pacer.org and our PACER YouTube page. We have added a lot of videos over this past year, some longer trainings like this one and a lot of shorter ones, which are really handy if you want just a quick snippet summary of a certain topic. You can use the search bar on our page and search out a specific topic. It's a great way to review information. All right, next slide.
Okay, so now we're going to do some questions and answers. If you have a question, please pop it in the Q&A. please try to keep it very general and, good for the group, meaning nothing child specific. We really do encourage you to call Pacer, reach out and speak to an advocate around very specific situations. But again, if it's a general question, we are more than happy to kind of touch base on those now. If you put your question in the Q&A. So first one here. Sorry, you were having a hard time hearing, but so school doesn't include a concern that you think is important for an underlying behavior. I think the first thing I always kind of like to say is, what data do you have to support your concern? So is it things that you're seeing at home? Is it things that you're seeing at school? Is it something your child is reporting about at school? And kind of collect some data on how do we know this is an ongoing concern? Was this a one-off thing? And right, so we need some data to kind of help drive that concern. So being very specific, providing data. Sometimes I tell you, sometimes if you have a communication log with school, if you're having emails back and forth from school, all of that is data that you can use to help support your concern. And again, that PW1 is used if you have something that you want to have added to that evaluation plan. School is not quite sure. You have the right to disagree with what the school is proposing and ask for it to be added by using that PW1.
Jamie, do you want to put a pause on the hands going up and down? It's just gonna drive me crazy. Thank you. Okay. So, uh,
They're very enthusiastic hands.
very enthusiastic. We get the point. It's Q&A. Okay. Thanks, Colleen, for answering that question. So, let's see. How can teachers recognize early signs that a student's behavior or emotional struggles may be linked to underlying mental health needs rather than defiance or lack of motivation? Evaluation. If you see indications, if you see behaviors, part of it comes with observations. Are you noticing any kind of patterns? Are there certain times of day that a student is having struggles? Are there certain subjects at school that they're struggling with, certain circumstances? Sometimes if a student, for example, has sensory needs, it can simply just be the fact that they're in a classroom with a lot of kids and the lights are bright and there's a lot of noise. So looking for patterns. I love that you're asking this question, Ahmed, because I think it's a fantastic question for teachers to consider. So a lot of it is just observation and data gathering. You can record. I know you have plenty of paperwork already as a teacher, but you can record observations. You can record patterns. Asking kids questions. I think this is a really, whether you're a parent or a teacher, it's a highly underutilized strategy. Ask a student if you see that they're starting to struggle, ask them, I am noticing that it looks like you're kind of having a hard time. Can you tell me about that? What feels difficult right now? Or what do you think is making you feel uncomfortable? Likewise, observing what does work for a student can provide helpful insight. So when they're doing well, what's happening? How are people communicating with them? What is the environment like? What are they working on? So a lot of it just entails taking a moment to sort of listen and observe intuitively, but it really is evaluation that's able to dig into that process of figuring out what those underlying needs might be. Colleen, do you want to take the next
Sure.
one?
Yep. So if my child has OT every Monday outside services and we provide an excuse every Monday morning, does that still classify as a tardy? We discussed this in our meeting and they were fine with it, but now I'm seeing tardies on her progress report card. So from what I understand, and Jeannie, please correct me if I'm wrong, tardies are in fact late to school. In regards to excused absences, that is, you're gone for the day and there is a reason why. So you can have an excused absence, but in regards to tardy, they're still coming in late. This is a decision to be talked about with your IEP team. Also, in regards to if your child is missing a consistent amount of services during the day, that could be impacting their progress towards goals and possibly service minutes as well. So it sounds like your team is fine with it. I would just double check in regards to district policy and school policy, what is labeled as a tardy, what is labeled as an absence, because there's excused absence and unexcused absence. But again, I would just check in with your policies as well for school and district.
Generally, something like an OT appointment, outside appointment, is considered a medical appointment.
Mhm.
So like Colleen said, request a copy of your district's policies regarding appointments. Is it excused? Is it not excused? The IEP can also address this. So if your student is on an IEP, ask that it be written in, that they be excused, that it not be written as tardy. All right. What are the parents' rights and options if the school denies or delays a special education evaluation request? Great question. That's where you would want to request a prior written notice, refusal, or delay. So if you request evaluation, Ahmed, the school has to respond. Either they agree to evaluate, or if they say no, we don't think that your student needs an evaluation, or if they say, hey, let's try this first, either a denial or a delay is still a no. So you can ask them to put that response in a prior written notice. And in that prior written notice, it has to state their decision, the data that they're using to make that decision, and there's a parental consent or disagreement portion of that prior written notice. At the bottom, you can state your disagreement, sign that you don't agree, and you can either request another meeting with the team, or you can request a meeting called a conciliation conference. And you should feel free to call PACER. So if you run into this challenge, feel free to reach out to an advocate and we can walk you through exactly how you can respond to the district's response. But if they say no, or they suggest a delay and you disagree with their decision, say, please put your refusal in a prior written notice. And that prior written notice is your tool to exert your rights.
Okay, so I think I'm jumping to the right one here. As a parent, I find a need in writing focus and attention for my child who has ASD, but school says he is at benchmark for and expected for his age. Can I still ask the school to include a goal for it? So goals in your IEP are developed based on educational needs that were found in this evaluation. So when your special education evaluation is completed, and there's a section on there that says educational needs that derive from a disability. And sometimes to me, that's like the most important part. It's like, okay, what is it that we need to work on? And those are key pieces that go into the IEP. So if you have these concerns, one, we want to see, was that evaluated? Did we look at those kind of concerns? Um, and if, again, if we're showing that there is no data that shows that this is a need, it can't just be thrown into the IEP because we don't have enough data to back that up, especially as a goal, because a goal, that means we're really working towards this. If it is a concern that you are seeing, sometimes, especially in regards to focus and attention, it could be some accommodations, it could be access to a visual schedule or a signal that the teacher gives, a nonverbal signals that the child knows he has to refocus in, or things like that, can be added in as an accommodation to kind of keep working on those little things that might be a challenge, but it's not as a heavy of a need as a goal, right? It's not something that needs to be worked on with a special education teacher and really collecting data on it. It could just be solved by simple things like in an accommodation. And that's talking with your team to say, hey, I think we're having this concern. It's talking with your teachers to say, hey, is this really a concern? How is it going? Again, getting that data that supports your concern, to kind of figure out next steps.
If it wasn't included in the evaluation data, you can request early reevaluation to include additional assessments. So if your child already has an IEP and you're noticing that there are some of those challenges that weren't evaluated, you can request that they be evaluated if you feel like it's central enough that it should be worked on as a goal. I also encourage parents to use specific examples as much as possible. So if the school isn't seeing a need that you're seeing, break it down into, I like to call it paint them a picture. Paint a picture of what you're seeing. What do you see as a challenge? How do you see it impacting them at school? Bring specific examples. Oftentimes that helps the school connect with what you're seeing more clearly. Okay, so what happens when the parent disagrees about special education services for the child? For example, if one parent wants to seek support and the other doesn't see the need. So I'm guessing this means pursuing evaluation for special education. Um, if one person wants to seek support and the other person doesn't see the need. This comes down to who holds educational rights. So this is a little bit of a challenging piece. This falls outside of the special education process. So um, who whoever it is that holds educational rights is the one that is able to make the decisions about whether they sign agreement to the district proceeding with special education evaluation. If those educational rights are divided, then the responsibility falls on the parents to determine what their decision will be together, which I know is a really tough thing, but that's how it works. So the school isn't able to navigate that. That's a parent legal rights issue. I hope that answers that question. Add more information in the Q&A if you need more information on that.
Okay, so we have one here. What are examples of emotional behavior support strategies and possibly for trauma? It really depends on the need of the child. What is the behaviors that we're seeing at school? What resources are available at school? And I think it's very specific to your child and what their needs are. That an IEP is individualized. So if we are having these kind of needs at school, we want to be working with your team to how do we make this IEP individualized for services and supports and strategies on how to support them. Because how one child melts down at school over things is way different than how another child is going to melt down, and how the responses are going to be different. And strategies that are successful for one child may not work at all for another child. So I think it's one, really working with your team to make sure that they have a good understanding of your child, collecting that data. You're going to be playing a very important role in what works best for your child when you're seeing these things happen at home, or what are your supports and strategies that you use when you see them, and sharing those tips and tricks with school as well. But that's where your team is, they're all going to be using their resources to the best of their ability. So again, there's lots of strategies out there, but it is very individualized based on the child's need.
That's another good paint a picture example. So
Mhm, yep.
there's data, and then there is collaborative discussion about that's what works specifically for that student. So the data will help back that up, making sure that the FBA, making sure that the evaluation data looks closely enough to those specific areas that you feel that the student is struggling with. And then there's a lot of discussion about what works for this kiddo in particular. So if they qualify for IEP services, that individualized component is extremely important, perhaps especially when it comes to kiddos with behavioral, with trauma background. There's so many varied factors that need to be taken into consideration. Triggers, some triggers are obvious, some triggers are not obvious at all. So what are we noticing about what works for that student? What are we noticing about what causes them to react with behaviors or shut down? Learning more about what those influences are, because if we can mitigate those, that's half the battle. What can we adjust, remove, accommodate, come alongside of to help that student feel safe enough to be ready to learn, to be ready to engage with an educational program? Okay, My kid has difficulty with asking for help. He would rather avoid thinking about the problem as he is scared of uncertainty and unpredictability associated with it. He's focused on his immediate emotional safety. Um, so, what kind of evaluation is helpful for him? So, when you are working with the team to develop an evaluation plan, all you need to do is express your concerns. So, you've really beautifully outlined that here. Self advocacy, asking for help, maybe self-confidence in knowing how to ask for help and who to connect with. Share the concerns about those obstacles you're seeing. It's the role of the IEP team to determine which assessments to use. So you don't have to know exactly what they're going to use to assess him or determine what kind of evaluation will be helpful. You share the concerns, and then the team determines which tools they normally would use to assess those concerns. And again, like we were saying in the evaluation presentation, once you get the prior written notice that outlines the evaluation plan, you can come back to that case manager before you sign agreement to the evaluation plan and say, here are my concerns. Can you help line up my concerns with the assessments that you've included in the prior written notice to make sure each one of your concerns is addressed?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm not quite sure about this next question. What about the families that denies the disabilities and the interventions and support their children need?
Is this from I'm assuming, Colleen, this is from a
Uh,
teacher perspective.
okay, yeah.
Um, and the answer to that is that the parent has to agree to
Mhm.
evaluate. So it's a good question and it's an important question. Sometimes, as professionals work with families, spending a little bit of time with families, sharing, focusing on the strengths. What do you enjoy about that student? What do they do really well? And then sharing observations. Here's what I notice about where they're struggling, can be a way to open the door to discuss options. But it is up to the parent. So evaluation does not proceed without parental consent. So do high schools offer evaluation or testing for ADHD if a student has a 504? So evaluation, you can request special education evaluation for a student who is on a 504. They can test for focus, executive functioning. When it comes to ADHD, the school under Minnesota regulations requires that there is an outside diagnosis of ADHD within the past 12 months. ADHD falls under that other health disabilities category. So they can include that in assessments, that attention component, but you would need an outside diagnosis from the past 12 months.
I have a rough time getting school to see how a student is lacking short-term memory after a major TBI. They are soon to present the results. So it sounds like you've already started the eval process. How much time do I have to go through the data and their findings? Can I have the data behind their findings? So you will receive your educational summary report. It will be about 20 pages easily when you get that document. When your team is just about done with their evaluation report, when your 30 school days are up in regards to that evaluation, they'll contact you to schedule a meeting, and the meeting will basically say, yep, this is, whether or not your child qualifies, the disability category that they qualify under. And then they'll share results, right? They'll share how did testing go? What did we find? What went well? What are the strengths? What are the challenges, right? They're going to share everything that they found. And remember, it's not just one person, it's a school psychologist. If there were speech concerns, there's a speech pathologist. If there were sensory concerns, and an OT is involved. So you're going to have multiple people all sharing how everything went for them for testing, and what they found. And again, if your child qualifies, sometimes they might say, oh, okay, these were the concerns we found. So this might be a great goal that we're going to work towards. Sometimes there's goal talk, sometimes there's not. Depends on the meeting and how long you have. You do get that report. I often tell families sometimes because a team is so many people that are involved in this evaluation plan, they are finalizing it right as they're walking into that meeting. So there is no obligation for them to give it to you beforehand. Some districts can. Sometimes you get it 12 hours before the meeting. They send it off your way so that you can follow along in the meeting. Sometimes you get it right there in the meeting. Every district is different and there is no obligation. It's just that 30 school days, right? So once that 30 school days is up, that is when it has to be finished. So you do get a copy of it. In regards to the data, I mean, you'll get a very good summary of what was done with a lot of like the questionnaires. You'll kind of see how did you score in multiple areas. And rating scales also will compare parent scores to teacher scores or other providers that may have filled that out as well. So you'll be able to see and compare all those results.
You can also ask where that concern is summarized. So, assuming that you ensured that the short term memory or working memory, it's sometimes called, was included in the assessments, um, ask them where that is in the evaluation report. Ask them to review that with you. Um, so, and how much time do you have to go through the data and their findings? I think Colleen alluded to this. There's the evaluation report summary meeting. You are part of determining eligibility. So sometimes the school will come to the evaluation summary meeting with an idea of which category they think your student will qualify under. Sometimes they'll come to the meeting with a proposed IEP draft based on the evaluation data. And I suggest to parents, when you get that evaluation summary report, as Colleen noted, it's sometimes 20 to 35 pages long. That's a lot of data. That's a lot of information to process. And most parents, I think, need time to process that. Even if it isn't your first evaluation, it's a lot to think about. So the school has to include you in the eligibility discussion. They also have to include you in the development of the IEP. So just because they come with a proposed draft for what might be included in the IEP, if you find yourself in a meeting thinking, I have not even had time to process what's in this evaluation summary yet, you can share that with the team. Just say, I need time to read through the eval data first. I need time to understand that. I need time to ask more questions about it before we move forward with talking about the IEP. So you can ask that they be separated. Sometimes I'll suggest to parents to ask that those two meetings be separate anyway. So ahead of time, you can request, can we have the IEP meeting separate from the evaluation summary meeting? Can we have it the next day or a couple days later or something like that to give you time to process? So just work with your team to see what their flexibility is, what their availability is to do that. But keep in mind that even if they come to the table with a draft IEP, it's just an idea. It's an idea of what they think might work for your student. But as you learn about what's in that eval report and where your child struggles and where their strengths are, you are part of determining what goes into that IEP. And you have the right to state your agreement or disagreement with the eval findings and to work with that team on the IEP until you feel that it's appropriate to meet your students' needs. Does anybody else have any other questions for us?
I think we did it, Jeannie.
Yeah, those were great questions. And again, please do reach out to us. This is a really complicated subject. You've all asked some fantastic questions. I think there's just an endless amount of questions, and that's why we're here. So I think Jamie, if you're able to flip back to that QR code, I think it was the previous slide. There you go. You can either go to our website or you can call the number there, or use that QR code and it will connect you with PACER. And when you connect with PACER, you'll be matched with someone who specializes in your area of concern or the question that you have to work with you on that. So thank you so much for joining us. It was great to have you here, and thanks for your fantastic questions. We appreciate your engagement and interaction with us. Hope you all have a good day and enjoy this gorgeous fall weather. Oh, is there one more question in there?
Oh,
Oh, thank you.
oh, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.